Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Young People's Hustings for Galloway and West Dumfries. We are all coming together via Zoom. We have got 5 of the candidates standing in Galloway and West Dumfries who are telling me they have soggy feet and soggy leaflets in different degrees, given today's lovely Scottish weather, and out trying to have as much canvassing, contact and campaigning as possible, given the current climate in which we're all trying to make a national election operate. Thank you to all the candidates for coming. I am John Loughton. I've been asked on behalf of the Dumfries and Galloway Youth Council. I like to still pretend I could be a member, but I've probably well past that sell-by date. But very honoured to facilitate this, to chair this, and to go through a number of the questions that have been written and selected by local young people across the area themselves that they want to put to you, their candidates, asking for their support in the upcoming election this week. This has been recorded, so you may be watching live as young people this evening, but you also may be watching it on YouTube and other places along with some subtitles. And please engage in the conversation at hashtag YouthVoiceDG, and you can find the Youth Council at Youth Council DG to keep the conversation going. If you want to reach out to other candidates, we will connect you on Twitter and other places with either the candidates' profiles or the local party as best we can. So with that said, the format will be, we'll introduce each candidate, ask them to speak for up to 3 minutes. I think the phrase is it's a limit, not a target, so don't be bound to fill that space. And then we will move into some topical questions and take that as far as we can to cover as much ground as it seemed possible and relevant. So if that works for everyone, we will spend no further time and get going. And I'd like to bring in, first of all, representing the Scottish Green Party, Laura Moodie.
Thanks very much, John, and hello everyone. I'm Laura Moodie. I'm the Scottish Green Party's lead candidate for the South Scotland region, as well as for this constituency. As you can probably tell from the accent, I'm from Yorkshire and I've lived in Galloway for 8 years, moving here from Glasgow. I've got 4 children and I'm a smallholder as well as a community organiser, charity trustee and the coordinator for Mid-Steeple Quarter. For those that don't know, Mid-Steeple Quarter is a community-led project that's buying back empty high street buildings in Dumfries and redeveloping them to make a low-carbon, sustainable town centre community. I was also a founding trustee of Massive Outpouring of Love, the local refugee charity, and I'm the chair of Kirkcudbright Skate Park, which is currently under construction and should open in June. This election comes at a time of unprecedented threats to our rights, our well-being, our environment and our future. As we recover from the pandemic, the Greens want to see politics being done differently, with people and planet at the forefront. We're asking voters to vote like our future depends on it, because it does. The pandemic has deepened inequalities, and as we emerge, we need to make sure that we don't simply return to business as usual. During the last Parliament, our Green MSPs negotiated the right for student renters to hand in their notice to private landlords during the pandemic, a ban on evictions over the winter, free bus travel for everyone 21 and under, which starts this summer, pandemic relief payments and an expansion of free school meals, and restored over 124,000 exam grades unfairly lowered by the SQA. We also secured major reforms to personal and social education to ensure every young person gets consent-based sex and relationship education. The Scottish Greens are proposing a £10 billion investment plan in this election that will boost the building of green infrastructure like renewable energy, railways and warm homes, and create at least 100,000 jobs across Scotland. And we put tackling the climate and nature emergencies at the heart of all of our proposals. The polls show we're the only party expected to significantly increase their number of MSPs in this election, possibly doubling their number. With a green MSP in every region, we'll build a fairer and greener Scotland that tackles the climate and nature emergencies while recovering from the COVID pandemic, investing in a better future for all of you, with no one left behind. The science is clear. We have until 2030 to tackle the climate emergency and keep our planet safe for us, our children and future generations. Thanks to the Greens, Scotland has ambitious targets, but we need bold action by government to deliver them so we can lead Europe in tackling the climate emergency. So at this election, vote like our future depends on it and vote Green.
Laura, thank you very much, and very well managed in terms of timing for us there. Appreciated. I'd now like to invite our next candidate, who is standing on behalf of the Scottish Conservative Party, and it's Finlay Carson, MSP.
Thank you, John, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for your invitation to take part in the hustings tonight. I'm Finlay Carson. I live in the heart of Galloway West Dumfries in Twynham. I've lived here for all but one of my 53 years. I'm born and brought up here, and no intentions of moving anytime soon. I've also brought up two of my older children, Hugh's 23, Vicky, who's 21, and my younger two, who are just about to be 2, and my son is just about to turn 7 months. So my reading is mostly Mr. Tumble at the moment, so learning a lot from that. And my background is I was a farmer. I'd had a dairy farm in the Borg area and diversified into IT, and came to politics very late, only becoming a politician, if you like, when I joined Dumfries and Galloway Council just over 7 years ago. And I was lucky enough to be elected as the MSP for Galloway and West Dumfries in the election 5 years ago. Having a number of children over different age groups gives me a good insight into the problems we have, and also the opportunities we have when it comes to young people in Dumfries and Galloway. And certainly one of my priorities is to try and create a economy and education system that encourages young people to not only be educated here, but stay here in the long term. This election should be about ensuring our new Scottish Government concentrates on the recovery and rebuilding of our wonderful country after the pandemic, and certainly not being distracted by constitutional issues and a second independence referendum. I want to see the government concentrate on addressing issues we have with mental health, given that there's over 1,500 young children and young people having to wait over a year for vital treatment. And the peak of the mental health impact of the pandemic is still ahead of us. So that's something that should be a priority. And long before this crisis, the schools in Scotland were consistently going backwards under the SNP. So we really need to restore our schools after 14 years of decline. And we're looking to employ 3,000 new teachers with a national plan to help young people catch up from the missed schooling we've seen over the last year. We also want to concentrate on getting better broadband to everybody. And we have a commitment to install full fibre broadband by 2027, particularly given that the SNP's R100 programme has been plagued with delays and failure, and certainly not going to deliver for Dumfries and Galloway. Our natural environment is obviously important. We live in one of the most beautiful constituencies in Scotland, and we want to make sure that that's protected for the decades ahead. And we've experienced some catastrophic loss of species and their habitats accelerated by climate change. So we want to bring forward a nature bill in the next Parliament to strengthen environmental protections. Transport's obviously really important to young people. Local transport infrastructure is really poor. We want to have a infrastructure commission to oversee our road maintenance. We're looking to invest 200 million in road repairs. We also want to see more.
That's time, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure I'll get a chance to answer later.
Absolutely. Keep people wanting to hear more. That's the way to do it. Thank you very much. And I'm now going to invite, on behalf of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, Iain McDonald.
Yes, hi. I'm Iain McDonald. I'm from Castlelis. In some ways, it sounds like I may be trumping Finlay. I've lived in Castlelis in the area longer than him because I'm older than him. And I've been, although I've been out the area for 2 years, training elsewhere. I'm a solicitor, so I've had lots of experience with dealing with lots of people, but again, trumping Finlay, I'm newer to politics. I didn't think I'd ever be a politician, but 3 years ago or 4 years ago, when with the Brexit referendum, I saw the distress it was causing to the younger generation of 2 daughters in their 20s. And I realised that, well, I wanted to support them, so I joined the Liberal Democrats and I campaigned in the 2017 election, in which actually, although it wasn't the best campaign for the Liberal Democrats, we actually increased locally the Liberal Democrat vote by 250%. I think we should all be in this to work together. And with that in mind, I'm very much all for Scotland being the UK and being in Europe, which is something the Liberal Democrats are working towards. The Scottish Parliament showed in its first years of existence that it could work together very well. I mean, as a lawyer, I saw a lot of things happening which were for our benefit. There were a lot of really good laws came in, and then it all seems to have stalled as independence and separation seems to have been what the people in power are targeting. I think it's unfortunate because I think we should all really be trying to move together to move forward. My campaign is more perhaps directed at the manner in which we do our politics than in policies. What really drove me to stand in this election was watching in the summer Justin Leonard and Jackson Corlow just make arguments for the sake of it with Nicola Sturgeon, notwithstanding Nicola Sturgeon was really just following the same policies in England. And I perceived Willie Rennery as being the most constructive person in the Parliament, trying to make constructive questions as to how we move forward from where we were, rather than just make arguments for the pure sake of making arguments. So I'm really standing here to try and say, can we not all work together, put recovery first and move on, and not spend our time and waste our resources, which are very short. We've got 9 years, we're told, for climate change, and yet some parties want to debate what currency we'll have and separate and put up borders. To me, it's very much a question of trying to move forward and keep together. For the younger people, I think we've got a very constructive Liberal Democrat manifesto, and within it, there's a promise of jobs for 16 to 24-year-olds. People are quite rightly very focused on education, and I've spoken to a few teachers, and it seems to be we've got an awful lot of wasted teacher potential. So education's a big thing, as is mental health, but we haven't to lose sight of making sure everybody gets a job. Sorry, my time's up.
And that's time, Iain, as well. Thank you very much, taking this Finlay strategy around the way when people want to hear more. Thank you. And the next candidate is from the SNP, and I'd like to welcome Emma Harper, MSP.
Hi everybody, thanks for inviting me here this evening. I have been a regional MSP for the past 5 years. I grew up in the Lowlands and Stranraer, and I currently live in Dumfries. And prior to becoming an MSP, I was a nurse and a nurse educator. I worked in Scotland, England and Los Angeles in California. And because I'm still a registered nurse, I was able to join the NHS Dumfries and Galloway vaccination team over Christmas recess and train to be a vaccinator. So I've been able to help save lives and protect lives in this pandemic. During my time as an MSP, I've managed to change the law on livestock worrying and attacks by out of control dogs. That was certainly an experience in order to look at actually changing the legislation. And, you know, over the past year, the COVID pandemic has changed so much of our lives. Young people have seen a lot of their future choices and prospects eroded by a poor Brexit deal that no one wanted. The coming election on Thursday, the 6th of May, presents an opportunity for us to rebuild from COVID, focused on the needs of our young people and the values of Scotland at its heart. I believe passionately about democracy and the democratic choice, and that young people should be listened to and help shape our future. Our SNP government has prioritised young people and many issues to make Scotland more successful. We have world-leading targets to tackle climate emergency. There's a guarantee for 16 to 24-year-olds to go to university, college or obtain an apprenticeship with training and also fair employment, and participating in formal volunteering programmes if that would be their choice as well. We have free university and college tuition. We've developed and funded the Modern Apprenticeship Scheme under the Scottish National Party government. And we've passed an act to ensure that the United Nations rights of the children is incorporated into Scots law. Upcoming is all children under 19 or all young people under 19 will have free bus travel and reduced rail fares, and also no council tax until age 22. there's been additional work that will be proposed, that has been proposed in the manifesto. And in my work, I have engaged with young people using Zoom meetings over the pandemic. And I am keen to listen to young people, because the voice of our young people must be heard. Our young people are the future, and Scotland's future is in your hands. And so I will be happy to take any questions as we go forward with this evening. Thanks.
Emma, thank you very much for that contribution. And to conclude our opening remarks, can I welcome from the Scottish Labour Party, Archie Dryburgh.
Thanks very much, John. Just hope I won't be last in the election when the voting happens. I'm sure I won't be. So not for the first time. I'm still in an election in Dumfries and Galloway. The first time was in 1994 when I stood as the district committee chair for the Transport and General Workers Union, in 2001 for Unite. And then in 2007 I was elected a councillor for the Annandale East and Eskdale ward, which covers Gretna. It's exciting, I think, at this time, but I think it's also worrying that the only hustings that we as 5 candidates have actually been on is for the Youth Council. And I think that is absolutely worrying. Now, I know that the Chamber of Commerce tried to get one organised, but nobody was actually interested in that. So I'm standing on the Labour Party, Scottish Labour Party's standing off a jobs recovery, an NHS recovery, education recovery, climate recovery and community recovery. At the end of the day, we started on that. It was about recovery after the COVID or during the COVID, because I think I have to agree with Finlay. We are nowhere near finished on the recovery part of this pandemic. It wasn't long, however, before the other parties jumped on the bandwagon, because we didn't want to have the divisive arguments that were actually happening there, and has been happening for the last 5-10 years in the Scottish Parliament. I think what we need to look at is partnerships in the future. Working in the council, of course, we have the South of Scotland Enterprise Agency, which was formed only last year, and we have the Borderlands Growth Deal, and this is about the jobs recovery that we hope to have in Galloway and West Dumfries. We want better infrastructure, of course, to make sure that those jobs can be brought to the particular area. And of course, we need to talk about the A75 and the 77 and linking our countries together. We need better job prospects for our young people and better transport links, because young people will tell you that actually getting to somewhere in Galloway and West Dumfries is probably one of the hardest things to actually do. So I was pleased when my colleague Colin Smith put forward the bill to put in that councils could actually run their own bus services, and I hope that comes to fruition. We need to look at better mental health services. I myself, as the Armed Forces champion for the council, deal with mental health issues with veterans, and I have done so over the last 11 years, and I've seen the devastating effect that mental health has on not only them, but their families and their children as well. So young people are involved with that. And obviously I've done the mental health first aid course, and we look for better support for them in the future. At the age of 15, 15 and 11 months, I joined the army, had to get my mum to sign to say that she would allow me to join the army at 15 years, 11 months. I swore an oath to the monarchy and the countries of the United Kingdom. And I want to see the United Kingdom stay together, because I think we're better working in partnership. And to end this small part, I think probably the best thing for you to do, or hope that you will do, is vote for me, Archie Dryburgh, Scottish Labour Party.
Archie, thank you very much. And that concludes the medley of opening remarks. We're going to move now into a range of topical questions. Just a reminder that young people themselves have asked for succinct answers where possible, focused on the elements that affect young people in relation to the powers of the Scottish Parliament, where you'll have a direct influence and role to play should you be successfully elected. Now, there's a number of questions we're going to go through, and I'd like to open with one around, of course, education. And there was a number of questions coming from young people on education, and the question is, what is your main policy or policies in relation to improving the education system in Scotland, particularly focused around the pertaining attainment gap and the poverty-related attainment gap that still faces young learners right across this constituency, but the whole country? And if I can come to Emma, first of all, to speak to that, if that's okay.
Thanks, John. So we have made progress with closing the attainment gap, and obviously more needs to be done. Obviously, the COVID pandemic has affected some of the progress that we want to make. £750 million has been invested over the last 5 years to look at challenge in poverty that's associated with attainment. Some of my goals would be to make sure that we engage with young people to be able to get into university or college or whatever path they choose in a way that supports them in engaging in that choice that they want. We have seen that the £1 billion over the next Parliament that is aimed to be implemented is part of that challenge to continue to reduce the attainment gap. And for me, I have confidence in the Deputy First Minister's role as Education Cabinet Secretary in order to take forward our solutions and support. And the Pupil Equity Fund is only one example where the teachers are given the ability to make sure that the funding gets to the right places.
Thank you, Emma. Can I bring in Finlay? Finlay, you spoke about schools going backwards, to quote you in your opening remarks. There was a reference there from Emma about £750 million of investment in the Pupil Equity Fund and other measures that were brought in at the last Parliament. Yet there still seems to be a big issue here. Are you happy with the way things are going, and what would your party be putting forward to do differently?
Yeah, well, it's quite staggering that Emma Harper still backs John Swinney when the only reason he didn't fall on a vote of no confidence was backed up with the Greens. But multiple studies have shown that the attainment gap is still far larger than it should be, and there's been 14 years the SNP have been trying to deal with this. So one of the things we would do, particularly to improve the outlook for secondary school pupils, would be to increase the number of teachers by 3,000. We keep on hearing that there's more pupils leaving school with more qualifications, but they're not necessarily in the subjects that they want. So we need to employ more teachers in science and maths to give a broad education, so pupils can actually leave with the qualifications that they want and they need. So we also need to look at disadvantaged children and the gap there is between the ones with the highest incomes and the lowest incomes, and that's an issue that's really not been addressed. The sort of thing that we want to do is make sure that children go to school and everybody gets free school meals. That's really important, and we've committed to £1 billion worth of funding to address that, and also the attainment gap, and make sure it's spent in the right way. We've got a government that for 14 years has underperformed an education system. The international the PISA results show that it's gone backwards. And even the architect of the current education system says that they're not being implemented in the right way, and it's actually narrowing young people's education. So we want to see, the first thing is to see more teachers, to give pupils the range of subjects that they actually want to take, and not be obsessed with pupils leaving school with more qualifications. We want them leaving school with the right qualifications to fit them for the jobs of the future and working with businesses. So that's really important.
We're going to come in on jobs anyway, so it's a good point. I know you'd referenced the Green Party there in relation to the record this year. Laura, can I bring you in on this? What's the Green Party's proposals around education, but particularly around the attainment gap that's still very prevalent?
Yeah, it's very stubborn. I'll start with the attainment gap and then go on to some sort of more general stuff. I mean, obviously, it's very stubbornly high in Scotland. And a lot of that is just to do with the wider inequities we have in society. You can't tackle the attainment gap in education without also tackling wider inequalities. In terms of in education, we want to expand our in-school income maximisation programme. So that would mean every school has an assigned family income advisor to make sure people are accessing all of the benefits and supports they're entitled to. We want to expand free school meals. We secured that through budget negotiations. We want to go further and expand that to secondary pupils as well as all primary pupils, and introduce universal breakfast clubs. There are a lot of hidden costs to the school day, things like school uniform costs. So we want to introduce statutory guidance so that school uniforms prioritise cost reduction. And there's overall spending limits to make those more affordable for people, and things like making sure that everybody has access to an outdoor education residential trip without that being reliant on your family's budget to afford it. We're proud of our record in education through the last Parliament. We negotiated an additional 150 million to give teachers a pay rise in 2019, 45 million to recruit 2,000 additional teachers during the COVID pandemic, making, instead of posturing to claim a political scalp during the exams crisis, we negotiated to get those exam grades reversed, and that unfairly affected those from lower income backgrounds. So we're proud of our record on that. We want to have 5,500 more teachers. We particularly want to tackle additional support needs education, because that has been really treated appallingly. It's especially poor in Dumfries and Galloway, with parents having to take their children out of education because they can't get the support they need. And we also want to increase the school starting age and reduce class sizes. And I think that's, again, especially important in Dumfries and Galloway, where a lot of small schools are looking at going down to one school class, especially in the primary sector, because the council has opted to go for the highest possible maxima of class sizes.
Thank you, Laura. Lots in there, lots of ideas and stuff. Can I just ask on that though? There was a big thing in there about school starting age. Can you just clear? Am I right in saying you want to take it from 5 to 7 years old? Is that?
Yes. So you would still have childcare for early years, but it would be an extended kindergarten stage with a lot of emphasis on learning through play. It's what they do in Finland and in most of the other European countries that have low attainment gaps.
Thank you. I just thought for young people watching to hear what that is. Not that I'm suggesting 2 years less school is a big carrot for young people, of course. But yep. And can I bring in Archie, please, from Scottish Labour, and what your proposals would be in terms of policies to help tackle the attainment gap and maintain education?
Thanks very much, John. I think importantly, however, children cannot learn if they haven't had a meal, and we need to make sure those breakfast clubs, for instance, across all of the areas in Dumfries and Galloway, including Galloway and West Dumfries, have breakfast clubs right across every school if it is required. I think from Scottish Labour perspective, what we need is a plan for every child to catch up what's been missing. And that's not stopping them having holidays, because part of the curriculum to make sure that our children are grow up healthy and hopefully wealthy is that they have some playtime as well, and that includes having their holidays. So a catch-up plan for that. We want to make sure that our teachers have all the support that they can, and that includes making sure that we have the resources for the schools within Galloway and West Dumfries. Obviously, the support includes mental and physical well-being, because physical well-being also helps mental well-being. And I do like the idea, and later on probably we'll talk about social prescribing, which is happening in a lot of local authority areas up and down the United Kingdom, where they're seeing magnificent benefits, not just for those that are in work, but those that are in school as well. I think what we need to do with the SQA and the Education Scotland, they've basically failed pupils during the pandemic. Scottish Labour will reform both organisations, improving transparency and accountability, pupils and teachers as well. It was a horrendous thing where, depending on where you lived, is what sort of exam result that you actually got last year. And that just wasn't good enough as far as I'm concerned for our young people. And Scottish Labour will also scrap the exam appeal charges, ensuring that no pupil is prevented from appealing their exam result on the basis of cost. So there's a lot of things, of course, John, that we can go on about the manifesto pledges and things like that. But I think importantly what we need is the resources in Galloway and West Dumfries to ensure that teachers and the pupils get the support and the help that they require, regardless of where they live in Galloway and West Dumfries.
Thank you very much, Archie and Iain, on behalf of the Liberal Democrats. Your approach to the education system.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm married to an ex-teacher, so I know quite a lot of the problems that there are in teaching, and I know why a lot of teachers have packed in teaching. I mean, Castells has just lost its head teacher because he's fed up with all the strings that are attached to it. But as far as the Liberal Democrats are concerned, we think every teacher should have a job guarantee. There are 1,800 teachers out there qualified who are not getting jobs. We've heard of the Pupil Equity Fund, but it's a short term. They're on short term contracts. They should be rolling this out so that the teachers have the assurance of a job for a spell. And Archie talks about the children needing time to play. If we got more teachers into schools, we'll be able to tackle the problem from COVID, because some people have talked about pupils catching up with more hours in the school, but it's not more hours in the school. It's the same hours, but more pupil support. We need more teachers in there. I've spoken during this campaign to people who are teachers, who have qualified, they've gone away, they've trained up, they've done all the hard work, they've come back, and now they're talking about going off to be carers because the council can't afford to employ them. It seems ridiculous that we're training up people to be teachers, putting money into training them up to be teachers, and then we're just leaving them dispensing with all that worldly knowledge. I mean, these are probably even better teachers with respect to the younger ones than even some of the younger ones, because they come with world experience. I mean, to me, a lot of what's at issue in this election and in this country is that there's no joined up thinking. Some of the things the candidates have talked about earlier are, we'll do this over here and we'll do this over there, but nobody brings it together. And to me, it's quite well highlighted in the education system that there's a lot of things where they should sit down and knock heads together and get it all working properly.
Thank you. On that then, Iain, I'd like to open up a question to yourself and then move it on to the wider candidates. One of the things the Youth Council and D&G locally have been really proactive on is their campaign around posing the challenge around the trips and school trips being one of the largest expenses, and that idea of, is education really free when there's hidden costs of sometimes, into the thousands of pounds for young people to access school trips. Do you support the idea of capping the cost of school trips at a national level?
I haven't come across that question. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, because it was so wet today, after some work this morning outdoors, I was in the office answering emails, and somebody highlighted and answered the one about people getting outdoors and doing things outdoors, which I'm fully behind, because in my work I've always made a point that almost the first thing we sponsor is anything that involves youth sports. So certainly, I haven't heard about there being a cap, but I certainly think it's something that has to be fundamental to any youth person, because I get so much out of doing the Duke of Edinburgh Award, the Scouts, youth hostling, all these things, and I mean, it's such a part of growing.
Yeah, a specific, international trips, things like that, and it's a campaign that young people themselves have picked up as an issue they face. So I'll maybe come, if I can go back up, maybe to Archie. I don't know if it's something you've come across, or if you're open to that conversation with young people.
Yeah, I mean, I think there should be a cap on the cost of trips, because I see how important that is. Earlier in my working life, I was also the Army Cadet Force Training Officer for Dumfries and Galloway, and we had world excursions for our cadets. And they had a cap on what they had to actually provide for those trips. And educationally, it was probably one of the most important parts of their education part of being within the cadets. But they also had to raise funds themselves. And that has a bit of, maturity about it, has a bit of empowerment for the cadets themselves. I mean, in Dumfries and Galloway, we're hoping to have all of our schools to get some funding to allow that particular, that particular trips and educational purposes to be capped at a certain level. But we need to make sure we've got the resources in the schools through the education department. The head teachers themselves have got funds that they can actually use, which was provided by the Scottish Government at the end of the day. We need to make sure that these trips are part of the curriculum, because the young people can learn a hell of a lot from actually going out and visiting other areas within the UK.
So it's about the curriculum as well as the cost. Laura, just on the capping and the costs, is that something you would support?
Yeah, absolutely. The Greens want to guarantee every primary and secondary pupil at least one week residential outdoor experience. But we also want to establish a fund to assist families with the costs of going on primary school residential trips, to make sure no child is excluded due to family income. One of the issues I think there might be with a cap, although I like the idea in principle, is that it doesn't really account for the situation that families can sometimes get in if they've got more than one child. So that, they might be able to afford one trip for one child, but it's when you've got to do that, well, in my case, 4 times over, that it can become really challenging, and a CAP might not necessarily respond to that, whereas a fund might work more appropriately to people's different circumstances.
Nice point. I'm sure it'll be something the Youth Council are hearing here as well. I'll come to Finlay and then Emma on the same question, please.
Unmute. Yeah, I think Beyond Education School really plays a vital role in supporting the health and well-being of children, and we want to make sure that every school has the opportunity to send pupils to outdoor centres, for example, and it was appalling that outdoor centres were forced to close because the SNP government didn't provide them with assistance initially, and they only provided a financial support packages after multiple cross-party. So Iain, there was cross-party support to ensure that the SNP government did pay out for this. And things like music lessons and whatever, really important as well. The SNP have said they're going to provide them free, but that's only after they took the money away in the first place. We all used to have free music tuition. SNP had cut council budgets, taken away, and they're giving it back as a bribe for this election. So it's really important that Beyond Education schools play a role in outdoor visits, expanding pupils' experiences, and that's music, languages, outdoor centres, the whole thing. So we mustn't be fooled by the sweeties that the SNP are offering us now. It's because they've failed over the last 14 years to do it. And I think Archie and Iain and Laura will all agree that we need to see increased investment in extra school activities like that.
Thank you, Finlay. Emma, I'll put that to yourself again. Again, the local youth council are really passionate about this idea of a cap, but of course there were some references made there from some of the SNP's positions previously from Finlay that you might want to respond to as well.
Yeah, I mean, education isn't my specialty within the Parliament work that I've done, but I know that we're 10 years in for the Curriculum for Excellence, and the OECD are conducted an independent review to look at what's working, what's not working, what needs to be changed. I support the engagement of the supporting funding for out of school education outside. I know that our Cabinet Secretary Fergus Ewan supporting the Royal Highland Education Trust so that we can get more young people from urban areas onto farms and look at farming and rural issues and simple things like where does our food come from. There's also supportive work that I have enjoyed learning about in the Prince's Trust work, which supports younger people who may need a different focus in outdoor activity in order to experience better education that way as well. So as far as, or in terms of putting a cap on the funding, I would support looking at whatever we need to do to ensure that there is a diverse approach to obtaining education for young persons outside or whatever outdoor activity that we can support. And I know that the recommendations of the OECD will be looked at and then taken forward depending on how the financial implications will work for that.
Thank you, Emma. And I think this leads into a broader element around so often these extracurricular or broader learning environments are provided outside of mainstream schooling, often by voluntary sector charities, some of them referenced there, you know, local community organisations. And of course, we're convened tonight by the local youth council, which is all part of the local youth work sector. I'm going to attempt a rapid fire yes, no element here and see how we get on. But and I'll start with Archie. Do you support bringing youth work provision, a bit like Prince's Trust and others, and including, I suppose, the Youth Council locally, bringing it into to finally statutory recognition to enshrine that parity of esteem as an approach?
Straight and simple, John, yes.
I like the length of that answer, Archie. Laura, does the Scottish Green support making youth work a statutory provision?
Yeah, we want to support the right for all young people to access youth work opportunities as well. And we'd integrate youth work into local and national mental health support and referral systems. So child and adolescent mental health and the NHS health boards. And also make sure all youth workers and volunteers are offered mental health and wellbeing training.
Thank you, and you're predicting my next question's theme. But Finlay, on the initial one around statutory youth work, would that something you'd support?
Yeah, absolutely, and I absolutely support what Laura said. whilst I welcome John Swinney putting more money into mental health in schools, I wanted to see that directed at youth work rather than a bespoke psychiatrist or mental health counsellor. Youth workers are that can access and be the signpost for young people without the stigma that's attached to it. So absolutely agree with Laura there that youth work should be the first protocol.
Thank you very much. Iain and the Liberal Democrats support statutory youth work?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much an echo of what seemed to be working before. That they had, there was people from the health centres went into schools and were supporting children in the schools, and then the money for that was plugged, so it stopped. So you know, it has to be supported, yeah.
And you'd support that becoming a statutory provision?
Yes, absolutely.
And Emma?
I do support the provision of making sure that young people get the support wherever they need. I'm one of the co-conveners of the mental health cross-party group in the Parliament, and we took evidence from the lived experience of young people, and a number of recommendations were made to go forward with that. So in the work to support our young people, I would support making sure that whatever provision is taken forward, we do it in a way that is supportive of all kids in all ages in their schools.
Right, maybe I missed that. Was that a yes to supporting statutory youth work? Sorry, thank you. Right, I just, I'm going to give the floor to anybody who is willing to say that mental health provision for young people locally is adequate. That, Archie, you think it's currently adequate?
No, sorry, I was going to nothing like adequate.
In that case, right, so on that basis, is anybody saying that they think it is adequate? Okay, great. So I then want to go, what would your party do to tackle the mental health, I suppose, re-emergence? It seems to, it's even more of a challenge now that's come to the fore because of COVID. And we sometimes forget how impactful this lockdown has been on young people whose social groups, etc., have been so critical. What would your party do to start to really change the quite shocking statistics and a lot of indicators I think all parties recognise around mental health? And I'm actually going to start with Finlay on this one, if that's okay, and then I'll go to Emma after.
Well, I think we need to put the whole thing in perspective. The SNP did publish a COVID mental health recovery plan, but it should have been done before the pandemic. Young people are already waiting far too long to get access to services. And we went into this health crisis with an existing mental health issues that the SNP have failed to tackle over the last 14 years. They're talking about recruiting an additional 800 mental health workers by 21-22, but that's woefully short. And in January this year, they'd only actually recruited 559. So part of our budget plans are to increase the NHS mental health budget by £2 billion over the course of the Parliament. And with that, we would want to see additional commitment to help mental health support in schools. And we'd introduce trained mental health leads in every school to work along with the youth counsellors and youth advisors that are in schools.
Thank you very much, Finlay. Emma, and then I'll come to Iain.
Thanks. One of the things that I'm proud of is the fact that the SNP in government were the first government to have a mental health minister, and the current mental health minister before the parliamentary recess is actually a registered mental health nurse. So I think we've got the ability to look at how we take forward with direct experience I guess the delivery of support. As mental health cross-party group convener, we were able to follow the track of the stigma has been reduced. So it means that it is easier for folk to say, I'm not okay. And the implementation of the youth information officers locally is a good way to help look at the stigma or destigmatizing rather than calling our counsellors youth counsellors. So there's support that is being taken forward. I, as a nurse myself, I'm really keen to make sure that we do tackle the issues around physical health and mental health and well-being. And obviously the COVID pandemic has highlighted the real challenges that we have. So in the next parliamentary session, I look forward to delivering further what we need to do to help support and tackle mental health issues, especially for our young people.
Thank you, Emma. Iain, can I bring you in?
Yeah, I mean, the mental health thing has been, as Finlay said, it's been a crisis for years. I know of people who had mental health, young people who had mental health issues 3 or 4 years ago, and they had to wait in a great big long waiting list to get help. And I know people more recently who've been turned away from mental health hospitals because there's not space for them. It is a real crisis, and it's such that amongst what the Liberal Democrats is proposing is to help people to train to be counsellors and giving them £5,000 grants to students undertaking courses so that we can get a wide range of people to train up and give the hundreds of hours of commitment that's needed. I mean, mental health is just, I'm sure we all must know lots of people nowadays who have mental health crises. Children are under so much pressure, as well as the older folk we know about. And the mental health problems feed right through the system. I mean, this country's great at looking at cure rather than prevention. And there's so many things we could be doing to stop mental health problems in the first place. But we've got to get enough people properly trained up, and it's the Liberal Democrats who've actually been leading this. They're the ones that led the motion through the Scottish Parliament to get it recognised that there was a mental health crisis, which everybody apart from the SNP seems to recognise and is trying to move on and get sorted out.
Iain, thank you very much. I'll bring in Laura and then Archie.
Yeah, thank you. We want to prioritise providing children and young people with the mental health support they need, and would invest an extra 161 million specifically in CALMS, the Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services, by the end of the next Parliament. And we double the budget for community mental wellbeing service for children and young people to £30 million. We also want to make sure that every school pupil has the right to access counselling in their school, and that every GP practice will have a mental health practitioner within it. We'd like to establish a triage system in every community as well, so people can be quickly assessed by a mental health team and connected to the right sort of support, because I think there is this problem. It's very hard for people to come forward to say they have mental health difficulties. If they've then got to wait indefinitely for actual treatment and support, it just compounds the problem. So we need to make sure that when people put out a cry for help and say they need help, that there is some sort of support network there ready to help them.
Laura, thank you. And Archie, what's the Scottish Labour's proposal for mental health provision for young people?
Well, first of all, I'm pleased that Finlay and Emma are supporting the council-led work that we're doing with youth improvement services for putting a counsellor in every school, and across Scottish Labour are also looking to put a mental health counsellor within every GP practice across Dumfries and Galloway as well. But there isn't a one-size-fits-all for mental health. I mean, I've dealt with a load of our armed forces guys and their families and their children with mental health issues, and one size does not fit all. So we need to make sure that when we move forward with the mental health issues that we're finding, and I have to agree with physical health and well-being, that we have to make sure that we've got that opportunity, that we as a Scottish Labour will champion and fund solutions that work best for children and their families as a whole, as opposed to just individually. Because when mental health gets into a family, it's not just one person that suffers from it, it's the whole family that suffers. And it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. We have to make sure that the person who is suffering from the mental health issue is the centre of that attention, and the support around them, including their family, is supported as well.
Thank you very much, Archie. And I'll give just a quick
Sorry, yes, you said we could interject. Could I just interject and say, does it help people's mental health when you put the telly on and the leaders of the Tory and the leader of the SNP party go on and on about referendums? That's surely adding the stress to the youngsters that's there already, rather than us all working together and moving forward.
That may well be the case, and I'm sure there's things on television that probably add and compound to people's frustrations and mental health that's within that referendum, of any sort of referendum, and beyond that as well. Yeah, I'll bring in Emma on that.
Well, I mean, today, First Minister visited Kirkcudbright today, and we were at one of the local businesses, and supporting mental health as far as cooking. And that was something that Scottish Government money has helped support the NHS so that this third sector opportunities and this professional business can help engage and work with people. And we've shown that the community engagement so First Minister got to see that today, is directly supporting families to work together, to cook together, to support each other. And that helps look at supporting families in ways that might not have traditionally been considered. So there is work that's going on across the region and then the wider Scotland that looks at how we support it. So like Iain's point about people shouting at each other about referenda, there's a lot of direct work that's going on already, that there's many fantastic examples that are happening that are helping support mental health approaches.
Emma, you just said at the start, and this is maybe just something I've thought about, obviously, given, if I can say, as a dual hat, as somebody who's a frontline health practitioner, and has been again more recently as a nurse, and of course now a politician. Are you happy with the progress that's been made? Obviously, part of the SNP, it's been in government. Or are you also kind of frustrated to see more progress? How did you have that dual hat role almost, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I've done a couple of mental health hustings during this whole campaign. And one of the challenges I have is that people say you've had 14 years to fix mental health. We didn't have this as a hot item up until Maureen Watt was made the first mental health minister in 2016 in this session. So I think it's taken a long time to help look at the stigma, and it does take a while. So for me, as a mental health, as a nurse, but also the mental health cross-party group convener, I do get frustrated with the challenges of directly supporting it. I know it can take a long time to train clinical psychologists, but now we're able to look at that and target that. And it is frustrating for me how long change takes. But part of that is tackling the stigma, and we're achieving that now, which does show that our numbers of people that are looking for support or seeking support is I guess, challenged. And again, in the manifesto for the SNP, we are implementing mental health practitioners in every GP surgery or GP cluster. And that's something that I'm absolutely right behind as well, because direct access to mental health support for everybody, including our young folk, is something that I absolutely support.
Thanks, Emma. I'm going to move on to the next question, but Finlay, you were ferociously reacting there, non-verbally.
Yeah, it's quite unbelievable that Emma Harper sits there and says this wasn't an issue when SNP came to power. It was an issue then, and the issue has just got worse, and we're not even seeing half the number of mental health support nurses, whatever, employed that was pledged. And every manifesto the SNP do this, we're going to make things better. Emma needs to remember that some of the people watching this call weren't born when the SNP came into power, and you failed young people. And you talk about the SNP investing in Kirkcudbright, for example. So why did the SNP cut the Wigtonshire Child Healthy Weight Officer? It was cut, and so there you will take with one hand and give away with another. So you know your pledges don't mean anything because what's happening in Kirkcudbright did exactly the opposite in Wigtonshire.
And can I just say as well, to young people, obviously there's a lot of quite strong views on this, and I think it all stems from, in different ways, almost, I think it's probably fair to say no candidate wants this to be a party political issue, and if anybody is going through any challenges, get in touch. You know, there is support there. Speak to someone if you are kind of facing that. I know myself, having speaking a lot as a young person myself, I've never found reaching out for help to be something that takes me in the wrong direction. It only gets help, and it's not always meant to be easy, but it does get easier. And so there is ways to speak out as well. I want to move on to the next question that come up quite a lot, and you'll be perhaps unsurprised to hear that transportation for young people locally emerged as a very critical issue, perhaps now more than ever, but of course in the area it's been one that's been a challenge for a long time. I want to ask the candidates, what do you think is the transport priority facing young people? And what is your main transport policy that will affect young people going into this election? And if we can start with Archie this time, and then we'll go to Laura after Archie.
Thanks, John. I think importantly what we have said in Scottish Labour is we want the public transport brought back into public ownership at the end of the same as the Welsh Government has actually done as well. I think when you look in Galloway and West Dumfries, one of the issues that young people will always tell you is actually try to get transport to and from places where they want to work, places where they get to educate, places where they get to meet people and things like that. So I was pleased when Colin Smith actually brought a bill forward to try and get councils to run their own bus services. I think, however, when you look at the transportation and the cost of it, it comes back to the sort of climate stuff that we're doing as well. We don't actually need 52-seater diesel buses to run a good transport system within Galloway and West Dumfries. What we need is electrification of buses and things like that, and getting that infrastructure in place. We've got a load of land. We don't have to have wind farms all the time, but there are some wonderful examples of where you can get charging points. For instance, in Nottingham, they have charging points in a car park, and it's like a bus shelter over the top with the PV panels, and that electricity provided transport reduces the carbon emissions as well. So you hit two things with that thing. We want to see, the dualling of the A75, but it's not just about tar on roads. It's about what else can you put down the side of that. So therefore, IT infrastructure was mentioned earlier on. Combined heating systems was potentially mentioned earlier on. Looking at those type of things, but also making sure that it doesn't cost a lot for our young people to actually get from one side of the constituency to the other. We also need to make sure, of course, with the infrastructure that's in place with the IT stuff, that they can get their education more easily available. Well, we've seen how young people react to, working online, and they've been absolutely fantastic. But the opportunities of meeting and doing all the rest of the things that they would normally do is that, for instance, in some places after 6 o'clock, there isn't a bus. On a Sunday, there isn't a bus. We want to make sure that we can run those services for our young people, but we don't need 52-seater buses to actually do that.
And does that include, do you support the reopening of the Stranraer to Dumfries line?
Personally, I would, but I would need to go through the SDPR system, which would be a negotiation, a consultation, making sure that everything is. I mean, one of the biggest problems that we have.
SDPR is this kind of feasibility study.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Personally, I would like to see that happen, but we'd have to go through that feasibility study first and through the consultation, because obviously the old line, there have been some builds sure. On the old line as well. Yeah,
sure. I'm keen to bring Laura in. I'm just starting to be conscious of time and the questions we've got. I'm going to ask us to stick towards the minute mark if possible, and just tighten it up as we move towards the end. Laura, priorities for transport for young people, and could you answer the reopening of the line for me within that as well? Thank you.
The Scottish Greens led the campaign to start reopening the Dumfries-Stranraer rail line. It came from former co-conveners of ours. We helped to organise the public meetings that were packed, standing room only, one of the ones I went to in Stranraer, and that is absolutely going to be part of the solution. Our Rail for All programme that the Scottish Greens commissioned last year is for a £22 billion 20-year investment in railway. The first stage of that for the South West would be electrifying and increasing freight capacity on the lines from Dumfries to the Central Belt and from Stranraer to Central Belt. Once that's done, that makes the connection line between the two much more feasible and affordable and more viable in the long term. Transport's the largest source of Scotland's emissions, and they are increasing. So during the last Parliament, we secured free bus travel for everyone under 22. We'd like to expand that to everyone under 26. That makes a massive difference to communities and low-income families and young people, and help to build that culture of using public transport. But Archie was also right. We need to look at electric buses and that kind of infrastructure and make sure they're built in Scotland as well as being used in Scotland. The charging points, an example in Nottingham, was an interesting one that was paid for by the workplace parking levy, which is something the Scottish Greens proposed at the Parliament and Scottish Labour opposed. So, we can do a bit of joined up thinking there as well. And finally, just to say, I have a bit of an issue with the hierarchy of needs around public transport that overlooks gender issues in terms of public transport needs and the needs of young people, because it prioritises standard 9-to-5 working, not the flexible working many of us have.
Thank you, Laura. Iain, for 1 minute on transport in relation to young people.
Is that the same minute as Laura's had?
Take the yes, approximately. On you go.
Well, no, I think the key thing I have here is just again the lack of joined up thinking that we have. I mean, I think we certainly I've got to have better transport. I think Archie is quite right about having big buses going around with not many people in them. It needs to be all looked at properly. And then we talk about dualling the A75, but the Tories have are doing their best to reduce the freight in the A75. So I don't know if we still need the A75 if we're going to have an Irish border and people shipping their stuff from Southern Ireland into Northern Ireland and not able to ship it from here across. So, you know, there's a lot of issues in here. I mean, equally, during the A75, how does that fit in with climate change and having more trees and wind farms? You know, the whole thing really needs to be sat down, maybe even have a proper structural plan for the whole of Dumfries and Galloway, with all the issues brought in.
And reopening the Stranraer to Dumfries line, is that something you support?
I think that's a very logical thing to be doing. I think the world's moved very much back into the way that would be ideal, yeah.
Thank you. And that was a minute, Iain. Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You.
Emma and then Finlay. And the same question, please, Emma.
Okay, thanks. I will be quick. Transport has been highlighted as a huge issue for when I've met with the young people, the MSYPs, over this parliamentary session. The South Scotland Strategic Infrastructure Review has actually committed to looking at the Stranraer Dumfries rail line to recreate it. I support infrastructure investment in the A75. Obviously, there's climate change issues about building more roads. The Infrastructure Commission already has looked at what we need to do for that. And I think one of the things that has come up is like looking at better timetabling. Archie's right about the 52-seater buses, but the timetabling where once you get off the train, hopefully your bus hasn't just left 10 minutes before the train arrives. So there's all this joined up working that needs to, or joined up working as contracts are negotiated and we take the travel forward. Rail is really an accessible support issue. So, and that's something that I'm keen to look at how we progress that as well.
Emma, thank you very much. And Finlay, just on the transport question with a reference to the line, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, absolutely. You know, we made a commitment to look at many of the lines that were cut by Beecham some time ago, and the Carlisle Dumfries to Stranraer line is certainly one that we're going to look at. I would also strengthen the role of the regional transport partnerships, something that was set up way back in 2005 to look at the planning and delivery of regional transport. That's something we need to beef up, and we would call for a 30-year review to look at regional transport way into the future so we can make the right investments. Rural bus routes have been inclined for years, and the pandemic has unfortunately increased that. So to address the gap in the bus services, we would implement the provisions that Archie's touched on before, that the 2019 Transport Act allowed local authorities to propose bus service in their own area, and we need to really see that push forward, because I think it's only the Lothian buses in Edinburgh that actually do that at the moment. Sustainable, accessible public transport. We need to ensure we have a long-term strategy to transition from the old diesel buses into hydrogen buses and ultra-low emission bus schemes.
Thank you very much, Finlay, on that. And there was loads of questions around transport, so I'm aware of time. We've got 25 minutes left, and I've got 4 particular questions that young people throughout this session are pushing to me to ask as well. So if we work to the 1-minute rule coming in a bit more formally, that's going to be very helpful, and we'll land this plane and getting through the elements we want to ask. The next question I want to ask about is a simple but important question. What do you propose to do to offer more support to young farmers in the area? And if I can start first of all with Laura on this one, please.
Yeah, we'd like to offer agricultural and rural skills qualifications in schools, including partnerships with rural colleges. We'd set up a farmland trust, which would create more entry opportunities in the sector, especially for those that don't come from a traditional farming background, and trial out new models like starter farms to give young people hands-on training in agriculture. We also want to look again at the subsidy and funding regime so that it prioritises and supports climate-friendly farming practices. In the last budget, we secured £5 million to help farmers transition to climate-friendly farming, and £10 million for a nature restoration fund, which farmers could apply for works to improve the landscape around where they live in terms of carbon and climate. So we'd want to change the subsidy regime so more of that was done, but there's still an awful lot that can be done in terms of education and support, and especially getting access with land prices being what they are.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I'll invite Iain, and then after Iain, Emma.
Well, again, I'm back to my topic of joined up thinking, because I mean, that's quite a big topic, because we've got so many farms every time they're up for sale, divided up and joined on to the neighbouring farmer. So it gets harder and harder for new farmers to get in and to find the farms to access in the first place. So I think, you know, it's back to looking at the bigger agricultural policies. I mean, it's fine saying we'll allow farmers to do this or do that, but if the farms aren't available for them, where can they start?
Okay, thank you very much, Iain, and then Emma, and then Finlay.
Thanks, John. There is a number of things that I'm keen to progress. Luckily, I've been on the rural economy cross-party group, so we've had the ability to look at what rural programmes are in place and what could be in place. I am interested in looking in supporting the Rural Entrepreneur Fund, which is a £20 million fund that offers £10,000 support for rural entrepreneurs. There's new entrant schemes that have been available. I'm keen to make sure that we support our tenant farmers, and how do we support them? There's issues of legislation that has been changed, which will support moving on with farmers if a tenant it doesn't have a son or a daughter or a family member to take it on. So there's issues around that. And I'm keen to, continue to working with the Cabinet Secretary for the Rural Economy. So hopefully Fergus Ewan will continue in that role. I was able to host a roundtable meeting just at the end of March so that we could hear about what actions could be taken to support our rural young folk, to help them into farming and farming businesses. And I've already been doing work with the local authority to look at SQA level 4 through 10 with the Scottish Rural College at Barney College, so that we can make sure that we have the rural and agricultural support that our young people who choose to do that need to be helped with.
Emma, thank you very much. And Finlay, and then I'll come to Archie.
Well, quite unbelievably, Emma says she supports young farmers, but the SNP actually cancelled the scheme to encourage young people into farming. We know that only 10% of farmer occupiers are under the age of 41, so it's really important we get young people in. So the Scottish Conservatives would reinstate the support for new entrants into farming that the SNP have cut. We'd reopen the Young Farmers and New Entrants Grant Scheme, as well as the New Entrants Capital Grant Scheme, and support intergenerational partnerships through mentoring, and particularly with a focus on supporting women in agriculture, who are really important. We would support succession planning to ensure farm tenancies work for both tenants and landowners, attracting young people into agriculture through a review of qualifications available in schools and colleges, because it's really vital young people receive cutting edge training and modern farming methods, because we're going to see a real push for farmers getting more involved with climate change, and research and farm diversification need a lot more investment. And we'd invest an additional £10 million in research to help with that work.
Thank you, Finlay. And I was trying to figure out if cutting edge training was actually a farming technique or an innovative approach to that, but thank you. Archie, same question to yourself.
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, farming is a very hard life. Look at Finlay; he's only 28 there. He's just, I am really, really excited about the Nexus projects that's coming from the borderlands, to see what happens to decarbonise our farms and things like that. I think it's about support around those young people who are actually going into farming as well, to make sure that they have real life experiences. So when we have job creation, things like that, we want to make sure that farmers are actually involved. We're actually talking with the NFU about how we can actually improve the opportunities for young people to go into. I mean, when I say we as a council are talking to the NFU, along with the Borderlands and along with the South of Scotland Enterprise, to see where we can get those opportunities and hopefully improve the opportunities for young people to go into farming, because farming is a massive industry in Galloway and West Dumfries. It's, it employs thousands of people right across the area, and we need to make sure that continues, because we're the biggest beef growing area within Scotland and one of the biggest dairy growing areas within Scotland as well. So hopefully with the South Scotland Enterprise, Borderlands, everybody working together, then we can improve the opportunities for those young people getting into that farming industry.
Thank you, Archie. Appreciate it. And I know it's such a big subject to squeeze into 1 minute, so I appreciate everyone trying their best there. I want to move into another question that come up a lot, and I'll go to Iain to start on this one, if that's okay. Young people keep reporting to us and to the Youth Council that they're super worried about jobs, more widely, but particularly coming out of the pandemic. What is your party's sort of message and offer to young people locally around ensuring there's jobs available in Stranraer and right across the constituency?
Well, the Liberal Democrats in our manifesto, we're supporting people top skill and access work experience, and there's a job guarantee for everybody from 16 to 24, so that they all have access to a job or to training. And to do that, we're proposing that we expand the support for apprenticeships and offer jobs through public agencies and other new programmes for the creative industries, and also in other sectors such as low carbon and artificial intelligence. We're also going to create a new national programme for 2,000 paid graduate internships with small businesses. I think also that our local council is to be commended for their approach to the climate change, and one would be hoping we might be able to draw jobs in if they can meet their targets and their plans for us having a zero carbon by 2025. I mean, that might not be met, but it's obviously a great ambition to try and get us a target that would really make jobs in this area.
Thank you very much. Again, perfectly 1 minute. Thank you very much, Iain. And Emma, the same question to yourself. What's your message and offer to young people around them being worried about jobs locally?
It's a challenge, obviously, for locally. We want to encourage young people to get to a college place, university place, but then hopefully come back to the region. One of the bits of work that I've been doing is to encourage a medical school to be set up in Dumfries and Galloway. We've seen with the pandemic that young people and all other people have been able to work from home. And so I support the development of better connectivity and support for that kind of working as well. The Scottish National Party have in the manifesto lots of proposals for digital technology, health tech, energy transition, decarbonisation, job transition, and supporting even food and drink innovation. So for our area, we've just talked about how it's a big rural area, lots of farming and support. So I'm keen to make sure that the sustainably Scottish brand that can be developed and delivered is something that we focus on for our region. There is so much scope in order to take forward jobs, because like for me, I ended up working in Los Angeles, but then came back and worked at home, and many of our jobs can be delivered locally right here in the region.
Thank you, Emma, for that. Finlay?
Yeah, I think it's a major issue that we face, and it's something that we should really be concentrating on. The Scottish Conservatives are proposing a £500 for every year for training and skills development for every young person and adult throughout Scotland through our retrain and rebuild account. We're going to fund about 100,000 of these accounts to help people to get back into work, but also to help young people find employment after training. We're going to bring colleges, employers, skill providers together and a new institute for technology to get them to co-design a new rapid retraining course. There'll be something along the lines of intensive courses focused around developing skills for the jobs that are going to be there. But certainly we need far more emphasis on schools working with colleges and businesses to ensure that young folk have the qualifications that they need for the jobs that are going to be there. And in Dumfries and Galloway, that is going to focus a huge amount on green jobs, renewable energy and technologies. And that's something that we need the skills to be developed.
Thank you very much, Finlay. I'll now invite Archie and then Laura.
I think we've got to take this green agenda and rush forward with it, basically. We've missed opportunities in the past and we shouldn't miss them in the future. whenever we have maintenance on our wind farms, for instance, the people come from Denmark and they come from Holland, we should be training up our young people to do that maintenance. And I'm really pleased with Natural Power, for instance, who are in Dumfries and Galloway. We've got 180 people working for them, young people working for them. Those jobs of retrofitting houses, maintaining air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, all of those type of things is something we should be grabbing with our hands. The latest infrastructure for charging vehicle points and things like that, we should be training our young people up for that. But we cannot forget that the public sector is going to be really important here as well. We need to have an NHS for the future, we need to have local authorities for the future, and we need to make sure jobs are available for our young people in the future.
Archie, thank you very much. Laura, jobs in the Green Party's position?
Yeah, so we're pledging £895 million to invest in nature restoration, and that will create 6,000 jobs, almost entirely rural. So that means expanding our national parks, restoring peatlands, planting forestry and woodlands, ranger services, biodiversity officers, a whole range of jobs there. Likewise with construction and retrofitting homes, we want to roll out a mass retrofitting homes scheme to make sure everybody lives in warm homes, and also that we've trained people to work in renewable energy, whether that's wind or tidal or air source heat pumps. One of the ways we want to do that is to ensure that there's funding parity between further education and higher education, so that people in areas where there isn't necessarily a university or not a big university can access further education at training colleges and really high quality courses to train them to carry out these jobs. But yeah, it's going to take massive investment, and we'd expand the young person's job guarantee to 30, everyone under 30.
Thank you very much. Impressively on 1 minute to the point there. Thank you. We've got two more questions, and they've come up actually as themes quite strongly to two particular, I suppose, communities of young people that I'd like to ask. And I'm going to come to Emma first on this question, if it's okay. And this comes, I guess, out of a number of questions surrounding the LGBTQ plus community. And in particular, could you please tell us where your party stands on reforming the Gender Recognition Act? Sorry, and then Emma, and then Finlay after.
Okay, thanks. It's become a very emotive and polarised issue, and maybe luckily for us in Galloway that there aren't as many Twitter users as there are more widely. But my party, as in the SNP, want to move forward with changes to the Gender Recognition Act. I support that. I support treating people fairly, supporting equality, and supporting people who might be the most vulnerable in our society. I want to make sure that we protect everybody and have a society that is fair and equal.
Thank you very much, Emma. Finlay, and the Scottish Conservatives' position on the Gender Recognition Act?
Yeah, absolutely. There are certainly issues. I think one thing that's been the sort of elephant in the room is the protection of women's rights, and that's really important. We are born male or female, and we need to be incredibly careful that we don't impinge on, women's rights. I want everybody to have the same opportunities in life, no matter what their gender or what their sex is. But we need to be really careful that we don't have a debate that does inadvertently affect women's rights, and that is the big elephant in the room at the moment, and we need to be very careful to ensure that one person's right doesn't impinge on someone else's, and the protection of women is really important. That's something that's come out in the debate over the last 18 months in particular.
Thank you, Finlay. I'll go Archie, then Laura, then Iain, please.
Yeah, isn't it amazing in 2021 we're still arguing about who we want to be and who we are and who we love, and it's just a really terrible thing that's happened over the many years. We as a Labour Party support the reform that's actually been asked for, and it's disappointing that the SNP have failed to bring forward the bill, which they said they were actually going to do in the last Parliament. But I think importantly what it is we need to learn to love ourselves, regardless what category we put ourselves in. So I think for us in the Labour Party, we're going to go forward, support the reform that's actually needed, but we have to be sure it's right for everybody. And that's the issue here. We need to make sure it's right for everybody. And there's a bit of tension in the LGBT ranks as well. So we need to sort of talk about that and make sure that they are happy with whatever we come forward with.
Thank you very much, Archie. Laura?
I don't think we do need to talk about this anymore. We've had 2 consultations on it, both of which came out with the same answers, which was what all the parties promised in their manifestos in 2016, that the Gender Recognition Act really needed changing. It needed to be a much simpler and easier process for trans people to make this simple administrative change. It has no impact and no bearing on women's rights and women's safety at all, not least because no woman is equal until all women are equal, and trans women are women. So if they are not equal and have not got access to the rights that they need to make this simple administrative change, then they are not being treated equally. I think it's an utter nonsense, and I'm very, very sorry that so many parties seem to be indulging it.
Laura, thank you very much. And Iain, Gender Recognition Act position from the Liberal Democrats, you support the reforms?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we were saying, it's just such a very complex area. I mean, Laura can maybe correct me, but when the Greens manifesto came out, I read that there was, I can't remember the name, is some sort of Japanese chap's thing you're going to adopt, which effectively it looked like it was going to abolish sex discrimination, which I would have thought was a step backwards, but I think it just highlights how complex this whole field is.
Okay, thank you. I'm actually going to give Laura the floor there just to speak back on that, if you have anything to add, since you were offered in there by Iain for the remainder of Iain's time, if you like. I
think he's referring to the Yogyakarta principles. It's Indonesian, actually. It was named after the venue of a conference that took place to come up with principles around human rights, particularly from women's rights perspective, and then it was revised later on to include trans and intersex and LGBT rights. And yeah, it's mentioned in our manifesto. There seems to have been a very bizarre misreading of one of the principles within it, but it doesn't really make much difference to this debate. It doesn't change the fact that it underlines our commitment to making it possible for people to change their birth certificates, which is all that the GRA is wanting to do.
Thank you, Laura. I'm going to move on to our final question of the evening that's been put forward by young people, and again, it's a very specific group of young people that would really enjoy feeling that they're being heard and having their issues addressed. What will your party do for young adults that are specifically living and facing disabilities? And I'm going to come to Finlay first on that, if possible, and then we'll go to Archie after.
Yeah, well, sadly, there's still a lot of issues facing young people with disabilities. If we're looking at transition from young people or children to young adults and into the workplace, there's certainly some issues that I want to see addressed, where the transition from primary to secondary and then secondary into adulthood, if you like, there's some real failings there where, children's social services into adult social services, there's some failings where people are not supported properly. We have real issues with disabilities when it comes to transport. We touched on rural transport. Those problems are just magnified hugely when it comes to disabled young people and getting around. So yeah, a lot of work needs to be done in that. But certainly over the last 5 years, one of the issues that I've tried to help people with is the transitioning between stages in young people's life, and particularly the transition from a young disabled person who's treated as a child to the transition to being a young disabled adult. There's not enough support services there to assist young people. Also in the workplace, I want to see more support for young disabled people to get the training for jobs that are available in the local area, and support financially for transport to that. So yeah, lots more to do, transport and transitioning.
Thank you very much. Archie, we're able to squeeze a minute 20 seconds roughly for each person as I've calculated it. So over to yourself.
Yes, and I take it you're taking that 10 seconds off my minute and 20, are you? so basically, I've been involved with Disability Discrimination Act through my role in the trade unions, for instance, and I got involved with the Disability Discrimination Act in the 1980s and 1990s, and then coming on to the Equality Act after that. And I see there is massive problems for young people who are trying to get homes who have a disability. And no more so recently, I worked with New Start Recycle, which is an upcycling sort of rehoming of loved goods, for instance, in furniture. And the amount of disabled people who have problems in getting a home and also getting into that home has been horrendous. As my role in this housing forum chair, and I'm working with registered social landlords to try and improve that accessibility for young people. I have to say, Lordburn Housing Association have been fantastic in the work that they've actually been doing across Dumfries and Galloway. And I'm working with Wheatley Group, who are now DGHP, to try and improve that access as well. So I am going to try and get the housing associations, the registered social landlords, to work harder with the Youth Council.
Thank you very much. And you didn't need that 10 seconds, so it was fine. We'll bring in Laura.
Thanks. We'd support the incorporation of the UN Convention on the Rights of Disabled People into Scots law to fully promote and protect and realise people's rights. We think there needs to be a review of disability assistance and carers assistance, and that should be combined with instituting a national care service, which will help to join up a lot of the support that people need with disabilities. We think the Scottish Government needs to be an exemplar of good practice in removing the barriers that disabled people face, particularly in terms of employment. And we'd like young disabled people to be involved in the creation of the Young Person's Jobs Guarantee and design the employability support systems that need to be around that. Really important to deliver inclusive education. And I think that's been a big problem, the lack of support through ASN and additional supports for learning. And make inclusive communication the norm. I know you were failed at the last minute by your BSL interpreters, but to have all of that more integrated and more naturally occurring would be really important in the future.
Thank you, Laura. And I know, just to say on behalf of the Youth Council, they are subtitling this intentionally after and putting it out as a recording as well. So I think that was.
I used to be a subtitler in a previous life, so they have my solidarity.
Great. Iain, over to yourself, please, in the Liberal Democrats' position on young people living with disabilities.
I think we're hearing from most people here, as I keep saying, most people, everybody want to move in the same direction. I think I'm really would be just echoing the mostly what everybody here's said. We're all wanting to move forward with all these things. I don't think there's much really I can add if you're wanting to give other people more time.
Maybe is there any particular policy, particularly around disabilities or young people in the manifesto, that you'd like to highlight to the young people listening?
It's not something I've immediately flagged up myself, I have to confess. But being the Liberal Democrats, they're trying to move forward with all the healthcare services and support for everybody in all the quarters.
Okay, no worries at all. Thank you very much. And then to close the question off, actually, I'll pass on to Emma.
Thanks. It is a great question because, like for me, I have a hidden disability. I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I support the Scottish National Party's change to the mechanism to have disabled candidates on the first position on the regional list, for instance. So if we get more disabled people in Parliament as members of the Scottish Parliament, then it will absolutely highlight and raise awareness of what does need to be changed. And so for young people, I think it's something that for me, I am keen to continue to look at what we need to do. When I was on Health Committee as Deputy Convener, a lot of the activities that we talked about was about accessible housing. And I absolutely agree with Archie that Lordburn Housing has done a fantastic job in making accessible homes for anybody with a disability. So that's something that I absolutely support. And we need to make sure that we continue to treat people with the best fairness and equality mechanisms and support people who are transitioning as young persons into adulthood who have a disability, whether it is a hidden disability or not. And I think it's something that we really need to be conscious of as we take our actions forward.
Thank you very much, Emma, for that. And thank you to all our candidates. We've put you through the mill with a whole range of different questions, and there's a whole bunch of questions sitting in the Q&A and in my phone and in my list that young people are desperate to ask more, but we've hit time and we've got through as many of them as we can. On behalf of all the young people and the Youth Council, can I say a big thank you to all of you for coming together. And I think what I heard earlier on is this is the first hustings where you've all been together online. and the fact that it's young people, apparently those people who don't care about politics, that have brought you together. I think that's a great example of challenging ways of stereotypes to today's generation. I want to remind everyone listening to this live or in recording that you can engage at hashtag YouthVoiceDG and at YouthCouncilDG on the old Twitter book, Snap Talk stuff, then get involved. Happy voting to all young people on Thursday, and whoever you vote for, just remember that your ballot and your voice is equal to any other's age or otherwise, and it's important to take that step out to help, sadly, disproving the stereotypes that young people too often are bestowed upon them. Safe campaigning and electioneering to the rest of the candidates. Thank you all for taking part this evening, and I wish you a very safe and as dry as possible evening. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.